Hello, everybody. I'm gonna do a quick sound check, and I've mentioned this before. I was up getting over the initial hurdle of all the tech working, and my Video Ninja that I use for my phone, it was working, and now it seems to not be working. So it might be another internet thing we got going on out here, but we're gonna we're gonna do this together and have a lot of fun. So. I don't know. We'll see. If not, I can always use my laptop camera to kind of show you what's going on. But I have a lot of plants over my shoulder right over here that I want to show you. So this might be like just a laptop camera day. We'll see. But happy Saturday, everybody. Let's see, we got J-Bot here. Nice to see you, Jay. Shawnee's here, listening from the garden, and I've seen some of your videos and updates, so you got some good stuff happening in your garden. David's here, Bowtie Life, solid in pictures, great, thank you. All okay so far, so that's good. So uh, this is the last week of May, and we mentioned it last week. I'm kind of curious to know Dave's asking if I'm using OBS. I am. Yep, we mentioned that last weekend. I'm kind of beholden to my internet quality out here in the middle of a cornfield that's right over there. So it's as long as the sound comes through. Last week we had a little bit of buffering, but that's okay. But I'm gonna get right into it. So last week of May, I'm curious to know for your geographic growing locations, how did you fare last week? 'Cause I had a pretty brutal week. I knew it was gonna be brutal. If you're in Minnesota, kind of like to hear from Shawnee what your week was like. But this time last week, we were talking about expected highs in the 90s, and Minnesota did not disappoint. And even before we started the growing season, I think maybe February when I started doing these live streams, I had already talked about the possibility that we're going to be in the 90s before the end of May here in Minnesota. And I'm going off a historical records, just that the last I think 3 years we have gone into the 90s before June, which is sort of insanity because it was only a it's only a couple weeks ago when we were touching the freezing temperatures. So we're past the week. I got stories to tell. I would love to hear some more about your stories too. If you have some, drop them in the comments because I want to talk about those because we may have had some very similar growing experiences this week. Uh, this is, are you concerned with your internet? I am. I am. That's that's fantastic. Thank you. See, Shawnee says we had hail one day. I saw that you had posted that, but we didn't have hail up here, so that I don't know. It's just goes along with the time of the year. Yep, it's like August and May. Yes, absolutely. So, like I mentioned, I had talked about this briefly earlier this year, just because we've had the same. This was not a surprise. There was nothing new. I have some techniques that I use to try to maneuver around the crazy temperature swings. A few weekends ago, I'm pretty sure I mentioned that if we get shortcut or shortened on the spring season, I mean, just looking at the forecast, we're in summer. So these are summer temperatures here in Minnesota. Even though it's still technically spring, it's summer. So happy summer. It was an enjoyable 2 weeks of spring here in the state of Minnesota, but we're right into the thick of the summer now. So having said that, now the growing season changes because those plants that can withstand frost and all the plants that I had here on the property, they all lived through light frost. Those include the edible flowers, the violas, pansies, calendula. I had spring herbs like cilantro, and I do have cilantro up side the house right over here, and it's already starting to go to seed because it's at 90 degrees. I don't need to be around here anymore. And that's just the reality of growing here, especially in Minnesota, but other parts of the country. I know some of you are in different geographic locations. I'd love to hear more about what you got going on. So, let's see, Bowtie Life says triple greetings, global gardeners, from the heart of Old Destin, where Mrs. Bowtie is preparing for a weekend planting spree, and the garden beds are ready for action. Fantastic. The hot weather has made me adjust my gardening hours, says Shawnee. Yeah. Yes. Yep. Okay. So, story number one. Since we literally had about a 30-degree temperature increase here within the last week or so, thankfully all the stuff that I already had growing, it's been outside long enough to where it was able to do a good job withstanding the heat wave. So there's a few types of plants that I'm really checking in the morning and I'm checking in the afternoon. Since I grow in grow bags, I have to pay attention to the water use of all these plants. I don't want the bags to dry out, but I have another problem, and I've learned this from years of experience. It goes back to what I've mentioned before about air movement, airflow. If we have a breezy day and we do have some, it's a pretty good day. We have a light breeze. If we do have some type of air movement over the plants, that's not such a big deal. But if it's a really calm day and we have that heat increase suddenly, if have too much moisture in the bags for leafy greens like lettuce, I've seen it with carrots. If there's too much moisture on the top, I'll start to see problems with actual leaves rotting. So you'll see that where you grab a head of lettuce or a leaf and it just kind of like it's like mush. It's kind of brutal, but there's a lot of physiological things going on there. What I do to try to counteract that is one, I'm monitoring a lot. I only add water when I have to, but let's be honest, if in containers, especially grow bags, I have to usually when we get over 80 degrees, I have to add water every day. So it's quite a bit different than growing in a raised bed or in the ground, but I definitely have to monitor the moisture. If I add too much water, like I said, I get mushy leaves. So what I typically do, and what I did this week is, after I water, so saturate the grow bags, I'll actually shake the tops. So on the carrot tops, they're about this tall right now. I'll just grab them and shake them to try to get all the water that's standing on the leaves off. Because really, I don't need the water on the leaves, the foliage. I need it down into the grow bags. Some of my grow bags are already in trays, and then they're just getting bottom watered. And if I had set it up correctly for this year, I would have had bottom watering for the carrots, but I don't have that set up. So I'll shake the tops, and then the leafy greens too, like the lettuce righties. I'll shake the tops on those too. Also the sugar snap peas. So I have the sugar snap peas are busting at the seams right now with pods. So that's fantastic, but I don't want the moisture, the water to be sitting on the leaves of those plants because even same story with those plants is if there's too much moisture and the sun and the heat comes on, it'll just start causing it. It makes a very good environment for bad things to happen with the vegetation. So if you're in containers too and you're growing some stuff like that, try that. After you water, just shake the leaves to try to get the excess water off the plants. Even if we have a lot of rain events, so later this week it's forecasted that we're supposed to be getting some rain. That's fine, but the highs are going to be in the 80s still, and I'm not sure on the extended forecast if we're going to see 90s again here the next 2 weeks, but definitely in the mid to high 80s. We're pretty much at 90. And after those rain events, in the morning when I check my plants, I'll go out there and I'll shake the vegetation or the leafy parts just to get the excess water off. Because in the past, I've lost uh, dozens of container plants just from, and especially carrots, just not enough airflow to get the excess moisture off, and it's just a very good breeding ground for bacteria and fungi, and the plant just says, I quit. So I try to avoid that, and set up the plants as best as I can to survive these freakish temperature swings. Okay, so uh, very high temperatures very quickly this week. I lost some carrots, even after I told you uh, that I what I do with my carrots, and it wasn't the established carrots, the ones that have the tops this big. They're fine. They're just fine. It was my carrot seedlings, and I was debating on whether I want to even move them outside, but I'm like, well, let's try it out. I'll put them in the shady spots. Uh, but it's just too hot, and I nuked. I didn't nuke all the carrots in the bags, but I did lose quite a few seedlings, and they're only about this tall. So um, it's just what it is. Now today, tomorrow, and the next day, when we're supposed to be getting some rain, it's going to be overcast. So as you can see behind me, it's not a beautiful blue sky sunny day, and that's fine. What that means is I have a massive push today, and I'll get into this a little bit later. But what I do as a container grower is I look at the forecast, and if we have overcast skies or if we have a break from the sun, that's when I'm doing a lot of transplanting, especially from the inside environment to the outside, because I get that break for the plants to make the adjustment from inside to outside, or even from a shady spot to full sun. That's when I like to move them just so they can kind of get an idea of what's coming next without completely traumatizing them. So I did lose some carrots, but that's okay. I reseeded those bags and they'll be fine. The hardest part, I'm sure you've grown carrots before. The hardest part with carrots is just the waiting on the germination because they can take 2 to 3 weeks. So that's the tough part with those, but it's okay. To add insult to injury, when I went to bring those carrot bags back inside, so I start them inside under grow lights. That's what I started doing here this year because in the past, this time of the year, carrots need light for germination. But if it gets too hot, they the germination rate's going to be horrible. So I start them inside under grow lights, and then once they pop, that's I look at the weather and try to get them outside as soon as I can to start growing. But to add insult to injury, when I brought those carrot bags in, the first bag that I grabbed, so seeing grow bags, they got two handles on each side. I grabbed the first bag. It's a 7-gallon short bag, so it's not as tall but wider, which is great for the carrots. Grabbed the handles and I immediately went, ow! There was a wasp hiding inside that handle in the grow bag. So I don't know. That was the start of this week with the hot temperatures. Is lost some carrot babies and I had a nice encounter with a wasp who is no longer living. That was a rage kill of a wasp because I can't have a wasp like that. I the wasps are kind of like a annual, I don't know. They will go after some pests that we have in gardens. So as I understand it, wasps will attack like caterpillars and the type of pests that will eat our leafy greens and whatnot. But at the same time, I mean, man, lesson learned. So I guess what I'm saying is now I have to check the handles on my grow bags before I grab them because that wasp got me pretty good. 2 years ago, I had a wasp that was on my light switch inside the shop. So I opened the door, it's dark, flipped the switch, and there's a wasp right there on that switch. So I got stung. I don't know. That's one of the fun parts of living out in the country, right? Okay, I see a bunch of comments here in the chat, so I'm gonna see if I can address some. Hopefully, none of you got stung by any bees or wasps this week. Learn from learn from my pain. Okay. Jay says this is a crunch time to get the garden ready. Soil structure amendments, plants, and seed for my region. Yep. I think you're probably very similar to the Minnesota region. See, I'm experiencing a mixed bag of appreciation and criticism for what I do for other people in gardens, mostly non-gardening, expecting instant perfection everywhere. Uh, that's tough. Yeah. So perceptions, and I got a lot of experience doing my residential gardens for homeowners, families with perceptions because if all you know is what you see online and in the grocery store, and anybody that's ever grown food for themselves knows that all the plants that we grow at home or in our gardens, the produce or the parts of those plants that we grow to consume, they don't all look like the produce that we see at the grocery store at the farmer's market. So that's kind of eye-opening when you start growing food and you see that there's variations in the fruit or the vegetables with leafy greens, herbs, and then you realize that a lot of the produce that's grown for market doesn't make it to market. And that's just the nature of how it goes. So yeah, so like a strawberry or maybe apple or some leafy greens that don't look picture perfect or something that probably wouldn't sell well at the market is still perfectly acceptable to eat, and it just might not look as pretty. So that's like a perception. What I did with my residential gardens is I try to set the stage that I don't guarantee results. I'm going to do as much as I can to take all the variables out of the equation to set your garden up for success. And if it looks a little bit different than what we expect, that's okay. But if we get sugar snap peas that are actual sugar snap pea pods, or we get leafy vegetation, it might have a couple holes eaten in it from a caterpillar or some other type of insect that found its way into that plant. It's okay. But yeah, I'm right there with you. I totally understand that, and that's one of the driving theories behind what I do. I shouldn't say theory. It's one of my mantras, I guess, is I really I really try to narrow down and dive in, double down on connecting people with food. Because I mean, we could. I'm not gonna talk a whole lot on this, but the reality is a lot of the population uh, does not know where food comes from. So that's the great part about growing your own is that you actually get to see where this like sugar snap, we're in sugar snap pea season, so I'm gonna keep on using that as a reference. But uh, what does the plant look like that pea pod comes from? And one of my favorite parts also is a lot of these plants, especially ornamental edibles. I talked about this briefly during this last week at a couple of my sessions. Uh, but some of the ornamental edible plants are just absolutely beautiful. But you never see that if you buy the finished produce at the farmer's market or in the store. So when I was doing my residential gardens, that was one of the joys for me is sharing that experience that I see here at the plant nursery with my customers so they can see that uh, this is actual stunning purple cayenne plant before the fruit even grows, just with purple and white flowers. See purple streaks on the stems and the leaves. It's just a beautiful plant. And yeah, so that's all I'll say for that for now. But I'm right there with you. Oh, Dave said I've been stung by a wasp with a grow bag handle. You have. Oh, yeah, I'm not alone. Yeah, they're not they're not they're not fun. Yeah, yeah. Yes, wasps are they are beneficial. So I don't go totally crazy on eliminating their nests. Most of the wasps I see around here are paper wasps. Uh, and I try to keep them off of our house because I've had a couple times where they try to make a nest by our front door, and that's just we can't live like that. But if you want to live in that 100-year-old barn over there, that's perfectly fine, and I'll let them live over there. But yes, I have seen them on my strawberry plants. So the strawberry plants I have over on the other side of the barn, I take the row covers off in the morning, so the bumblebees and the honeybees, and I've even seen wasps over there helping to pollinate the strawberry plants. So yeah, they are beneficial. It just sucks when I run into them in kind of a, it feels like an ambush. I mean, if I'm being honest, it feels like an ambush whenever I get hit by a wasp. I'm not intentionally trying to encroach on its space, but it's all right. I didn't die. Yeah. Yep. Dave, we've had similar experiences, so yeah. Okay, so I told you the carrots, cherry tomatoes. So because of the temperature swing that was coming that I knew about, I and I mentioned this last week too. So lots of cherry tomatoes went out this last week, and I moved a couple. Actually, I think I have 3 dozen. Pretty sure I have 3 dozen cherry tomatoes that are out in the sun right now. And that one too, I hesitated. I'm like, I don't know if they were outside for a while. So I moved them into the sun. They're not in the hoop house yet because that's too hot for them. I'll move them into the hoop house probably tonight with the overcast skies. But overall, I'd say 90% of the cherry tomatoes withstood that temperature spike okay. And with tomatoes and peppers being more of a warm season plant, you would think they do fine when 90s come, but if they're not prepared for that temperature, then they're gonna suffer too. So I had a few of the tomatoes that are looking a little rough, uh, but that's fine. Once they pull out of that funk, they'll continue to grow and thrive, and they'll be fine. So that's that. Curious to know if any of you, besides Shawnee, if anybody else had any massive temperature swings this past week. Um, but for this upcoming week, like I said, with the overcast skies forecasted today, tomorrow, and Monday, with a little bit of rain coming on Monday, I think it was Monday. This is the final push for all my summer plants. So this past week, I was able to get the tomatoes, like I said, the cherry tomatoes. But this last week, I also potted up all my slicing tomatoes. So a couple of tomatoes. I don't know if I've shared this before. I do Oregon Spring. That's new seed company that I bought those from is Territorial Seed, and the jury's out, so I don't have the verdict on this. I will update you as the season grows on. Um, because I've had this issue where I've purchased what was labeled as tomato variety before, and then it just didn't perform like I expected it from the a different seed producer or company. So Territorial Seed, I got Oregon Spring. So far they're doing fine. I potted those up this week. I also do Tasmanian chocolate. I've been doing that for years. That one's got a very cool flesh to it, so it's like purple red. It's got a fantastic flavor and does really well in the Minnesota environment. So, Oregon Spring, Tasmanian chocolate. I also potted up a bunch of Romas. So I do VF Roma. That does very well here in Minnesota. I've been doing that for years too. Problem with the VF Romas, not so much the plant growth, it's the first fruits. So if you've ever had issues with blossom end rots, you already know what I'm going to say. It's typically uh, revolving around a water issue, and it typically hits the Romas because the fruits are longer. So what I do is I try to front load that plant. Like right now, I'm actually adding a liquid cow mag fertilizer. So once that plant gets to the point where the flowers start to open up, it's going to have all the calcium and magnesium it needs. But going in with that, I also need to keep the water consistent. So that's probably the hardest part. Those ones I definitely bottom water just to keep the water consistent in those plants, and they've been doing a lot better last couple few years. So this week also is my big melon push and potato. So this last week I did red potatoes. I also am doing Viking potatoes. Those are kind of a cool purple skin to them. I'm doing German butterball for the first time this year. They, I expect them to perform like the other potatoes too. And then caribou russet are going in bags this week. They're in 7-gallon grow bags. I also am doing the melons. So all the melons that I have in seedling trays are coming out today and tomorrow. So all the watermelons, I'm doing muskmelon. Minnesota midget is a new variety I'm trying out. We'll see how those do. So all the melons coming out. Squash, I did a bunch of squash last week. I got some more squash coming this week. And then, or both summer and winter squash. So I do Astia zucchini. That's through Renee's Garden. That's where I get the seeds from. I've been doing that for 7 years now, and that's if you like zucchini, Astia is a great variety. It puts out a ton of fruit. It's just a great performing plant, especially for grow bags. So those bigger plants that I just mentioned, the melons, the squash, those all go in 10-gallon grow bags, and they do just fine. So with what I do too in the containers, I like to go vertical on trellising. So I typically, when I start doing this here in a few weeks, when the plants get to that stage, I'll actually use a bamboo, 3 bamboo stakes. I'll tie them in a teepee, and then the plants can use that as their structure. Also with the tomatoes this year, I'm gonna try some of the traditional metal cages that you see, and I don't know, I might like them, I might not. I'm trying to see where I can save a little bit of time on the production side of it. The bamboo works very well. It looks cool. I mean, aesthetically, it looks cool. It just takes a little bit more time to tie them all up, which it's not a ton of time, but versus that or comparing that to just a cage that you just plop in and the plant goes. I don't know. We'll see. I'm gonna do a side by side comparison with those. So that's for the plants this week. I also got the summer plants. I'm gonna be potting up like all 5 of my basil varieties and then some other summer herbs. For the programming that I do at the senior living communities, we're switching this upcoming week, so I think I have a couple more potting activities. I definitely do on Monday, and then we're into the June programming. So the June programming is going to be harvesting sugar snap peas. So as much as I want to start eating those sugar snap peas, I got to save those for my clients, and we're gonna harvest those together. Jay says temperature's been swinging wildly for a month. Yeah, that's brutal. Dude, David says I'm about to work on heavier duty square tomato cages. Build or buy, I don't know yet. Yeah, I'll be following that. I'm curious. There's so many options out there. There's so many different types of cages, trellises, rigging for the same purpose. Um, it's hard to determine which one to go with, but I always like to try stuff out to see how it functions, if it's durable. I like to buy stuff that if it costs a little bit more up front, that's fine. I just need the durability so it can last for multiple growing seasons going forward. So I'm not constantly buying the same equipment every couple of years. So yeah. Okay. So that's what's happening this week. And now we're gonna switch over to this right here. If I can get this. Come on, internet. Okay. All right. Last week I was talking, or I mentioned we're gonna talk about some uh, chemical nutrients or nutrients for plants. So this is where this is where I like to get a little geeky, I guess is the word. But this is just a generic table elements that I found, and I wanted to share this because it's kind of cool. They have it broken down in different types of nutrients for your plants. So this is all great stuff to know, and I'm gonna start off like really simple, and then we're gonna get a little bit more in depth because yeah, it's good stuff to know. So the first thing is I've mentioned in past weeks about soil composition, soil texture. You have clay, silt, and sand. They have different properties. Uh, Good thing to know is unless you're in like a coastal region or you have very acidic um, soil, soil typically, especially here in the Midwest, it's going to have a negative charge to it, and that's important when you're talking about what type of fertilizers you're going to use, and that's what I want to kind of talk about today is how to select fertilizers or what's going into that thought process. Because if we're honest, there's like so many different options out there for fertilizer. It's hard to know where to begin. You got liquid fertilizers, you have granular fertilizers, you got slow release fertilizers, you have balanced fertilizers, you have specific fertilizers. It'll make your head swim. So I'm going to come at this from my experience, and I am by no means expert in all types of growing. So if we start talking about hydroponics, I can't talk about that because I'm not a hydroponic grower. There are people that are experts in that. I can safely say I'm an expert in container gardening. So I'm going to be talking a lot about container gardening. If you do have containers at your house, this is going to be pertinent to you. So let's start with some very cool basic stuff. As you see on this table elements, they have it color coded, which is why I wanted to share this particular. So we don't always think about this, but typically when you think about fertilizer and what to add, we think about the big three. So if you're going through uh, your gardening retailer or maybe a big box store that has a garden center attached to it, thinking like the Home Depots or the Menards or Lowe's of the world, you'll see on a bag of fertilizer, you'll typically see like MPK, uh, and then it'll have some numbers off after that. So MPK, it's based off of what we see here in front of us. So you got the N right here, it's nitrogen. You got the potassium and phosphorus. So potassium's over here, the K, phosphorus over here, P. But there's something else I want to share with you too. If we were to take any plant that you have, could be like a tomato plant. I'll use my sugar snap pea example again too because it's sugar snap pea season, and I'm drooling just thinking about sugar snap peas. Uh, so if we took those plants and we completely dried them out and then we weighed the plants, most of the dry matter of that plant is not going to be NPK, which sounds weird if you think about it, because that's what or at least for me, when I see fertilizer in the store, I'm like, yeah, but if you actually think about what that plant is doing, our plants are little factories that make their own food, which is incredible. So through photosynthesis, they're grabbing carbon dioxide out of the air. So that's the first thing you see on here. So carbon right here, then oxygen, they're painted blue, and they have this written as essential non-mineral elements. And then those plants are pulling the carbon dioxide out of the air, the C and O, and they're taking water through the roots, H2O, so the hydrogen over here and the oxygen again, and they're making sugars. So back to what I was originally saying, if we take your tomato or your sugar snap peas and we dried them out and weighed them, a majority of that plant's weight is going to be these blue elements, the carbon, especially carbon. So if you hear documentaries or news stories or reporters talking about carbon, or you hear documentaries, especially in recent years, about carbon fixing. I know there's companies out now that are actually like when we talk about carbon credits. There's companies out there that focus on. It's crazy. I'll talk briefly on this because I just did a little research. I was curious. I kept on hearing about these carbon credits. I was trying to figure out what was going on with that. But there are companies in existence today that actually actively seek like farms, forests, to do like offsetting carbon credits. So a company that is mostly based on fossil fuels, they can buy these carbon credits to like offset the what they're producing. So it's interesting that these industries are even in existence. But back to the purposes of our discussion, most of the dry matter weight of your plants are not going to be nitrogen, phosphorus, or potassium, or anything else on this periodic table. It's going to be lots of carbon. So, so that's the first level of this conversation. Then the next one is we get into the essential mineral elements. So you have macro elements or macronutrients, and then you have micronutrients. The macros where the plant's going to be using more. And like I said, it's not, there's no, like no comparison. So the amount of carbon, oxygen, and hydrogen that plant's going to be consuming is going to be far greater than any nitrogen, phosphorus, or potassium. Uh, but they are going to be consuming a lot of nitrogen because they need that for the building blocks. That's gives you the green color on the plants. So nitrogen right here is responsible for that green color in your plants right there. So then some of these other elements that we see, we got boron, we got magnesium, we have calcium over here on this side. So magnesium, calcium. And I want to briefly talk about this periodic table. So I know I'm giving you flashbacks to high school chemistry. I think I mentioned last week I slept through most of my high school chemistry, unless we were blowing stuff up. That's what got my attention. But when I went through college chemistry, I was paying attention because everything that's highlighted on here, I want to make sure I fully understood this because with container growing in particular, the rules for growing food or growing plants, vegetables and fruits in containers are there's some similarities, but there's a lot of differences. So I wanted to make sure that I fully understood how all of these chemical elements interact with my potting soil mix, because how these interact with my plants in the potting soil determines on what type of fertilizers I select and use. Um, but this gives you a really good baseline idea of the plant nutrients or the elements that our plants need to grow and thrive. So with that, I also want to mention that if we remember from our chemistry classes, if you look over towards the right side of this table, without going too far into electron theory, we have the right side of the table where these are happy elements where their outer electron shell is complete. When we start going to this side of the table to the left, where the hydrogen, the magnesium, the calcium, the potassium, we start to get to the positive charged side of the elements. These guys want electrons to be complete, is what I'm saying. So I mentioned briefly here a week ago or so, most soils in the Midwest are going to have a negative charge. So when we talk about like a calcium that has a positive charge to it, this is going to stick to the like a clay particle in your soil, um, more so than nitrogen. So nitrogen, we're closer to this side, so we're talking about a happier element where it's got more electrons in its the valence electrons or the outer ring. So what I'm getting at is these guys on this side of the periodic table, the magnesium, the potassium, the calcium, since they have a positive charge and you have a negative soil here in the Midwest, these are going to be sticking around in your soil better than this side of the table. So if we have nitrogen in our soil, that's got a negative charge, you have a negative charge in your soil, what's going to probably happen is this nitrogen is not going to be hanging out very long in your soil. So that's the key takeaway of where are these elements on this periodic table. If I have a negative or alkaline soil or negative charged soil, how are these elements going to interact with the soil? Now, if I have a acidic soil, so it's got a more of a positive charge, then we're going to have a different type of situation than what we see on here. So that's where we're at with this. We can naturally go into the next part of this of what happens when we don't have the correct ratio of nutrients in the soil or the like potting mix, and we start to get some problems. So, like I said, with nitrogen, I won't go or spend too much time on this because this is all stuff that you can Google on your own, but it's just good to know when you got seedlings or you got adult plants on what you're looking for, what the plant's trying to tell you, because even though the plant's not speaking English, it is going to show you or tell you through its growth habit on what's going on, what's happening. So nitrogen being one of the larger macronutrients that the plant needs, when it starts to get short, and what's very cool about plants is that an element like nitrogen, if a plant is actively growing and it doesn't have enough nitrogen, it can start to recycle the plant. So if you ever have a plant, let's use a tomato plant in particular. If you have a tomato plant that's growing, it's not quite to the flower and fruiting stage, but you notice that the older leaves, so the leaves closer to the soil or the bottom of the plant start to turn yellow, it's very likely that plant is running low on nitrogen. And what that plant is able to do is it's actually able to pull the nitrogen out of the lower leaves on the plant. It's basically recycling nutrients. It will run that nitrogen to the actively growing part of that plant, and it'll reallocate it there. So that's a very cool feature of our plants is that some elements, not all, they can relocate nutrients. So if we came up to our tomato plant and we noticed that the lower leaves are yellowing, um, but that plant is still growing, we can supplement or side dress or add some type of nitrogen fertilizer to that plant. And I don't want to make a blanket statement say it's probably nitrogen deficiency because yellowing of leaves can also happen if you overwater. So that's something to know too. But as far as the purposes of this discussion with nutrients, um, nitrogen will cause something that you see right here. Okay, so that's nitrogen. Phosphorus is another macronutrient, so kind of let's see what that looks like on here. So on this tomato plant or a tomato seedling, everybody's favorite right now because we're getting in the tomato season. Purpling, especially on the underside of leaves and veins. So you can kind of see what this looks like here. So with those macronutrients, the nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, those are the elements that the plant's going to be using a lot more of um, for its growth. And this is a common occurrence with a tomato plant. Then we'll go to potassium. So what potassium looks like, or a deficiency, some common plants. It's kind of cool. Honestly, from my standpoint, when I see stuff like this, I do think it's kind of cool. Sometimes if I over fertilize my seedlings or something happens, there's a growing condition change and the plants they're struggling. They're not they're still growing, but they're just struggling. I've taken photos of this. I might share this later. I've taken some photos because the colors that are expressed in that plant are just so. beautiful because it's kind of like a rainbow on a leaf. Of course, the plant's not growing at its optimum, but they look very cool. So this one's this page right here is a university page. A couple ones I found. This one comes from University of Arizona, and then it talks more about deficiency symptoms and fertilizer sources. So I'll talk just briefly too about nitrogen, and then I want to show you a couple of cool things with the nitrogen. But nitrogen here, this is from the University of Arizona. General yellowing of older leaves, bottom of plant, the rest of the plant is often light green. Most plants absorb nitrogen in the form of ammonium or nitrate. These forms readily dissolve in water and leach away. So that was something I want to talk to you about next. These are the two types of forms of nitrogen that a plant can take up. So um, any other form of nitrogen, the plant's unable to access and synthesize it. So it has to be in this ammonium or nitrate. Which brings me to the Midwest. If you live in the Midwest and you've seen row corn, monocrop row corn, probably seen farmers hauling around these large white tanks that say anhydrous ammonia on the back. If you know this, or if you've seen this already, or wondered why, or started to dig into this was one of my first questions when I started to take a soil nutrition class or plant nutrition class, because I was wondering why these farmers use this ammonia or how this process works. It's pretty interesting. So keep in mind what we talked about with the periodic table elements, and that's crucial for this because that nitrogen, it's over on the negative side of that periodic table. So over there, the actual atom. So if we talk about one nitrogen atom, it's over here. The anhydrous ammonia, its chemical formula is NH3, so it's got one nitrogen atom and three hydrogens. When that's injected into the soil, this is the chemical reaction. So the uh, anhydrous ammonia plus water will give us this what's called ammonium, which you notice right here has a positive symbol. That means that now this nitrogen has a positive charge, and that's crucial for understanding how this works. So the ammonium positive charge, and like I said, our soil here in the Midwest has a negative charge by default, which means after these farmers put this anhydrous ammonia in the soil and it reacts with water, it becomes this ammonium. It turns into a positive charged molecule, and it's going to stick around in that soil as that corn grows. So hopefully I didn't lose you on that. But just like magnets, opposites attract. You got negative soil, you got a positive nutrient here, nitrogen, and that plant is now able to access that molecule, that nitrogen. Okay, the other type of uh, fertilizer is nitrate, or the other version that a plant can take is nitrate. And you can see right here, after a period of time in the soil, this is going to turn into nitrates, and it's now got a negative charge. That's a problem. And I'm going to talk briefly about this too, because if you have heard of documentaries or you heard any news stories or anything like that recently, here, especially here in the Midwest. Sorry, I got a helicopter going by me right now. I'm going to wait just a minute for that to leave, otherwise it's probably be hard to hear me. Okay. All right. So just to recap, anhydrous ammonia goes in the ground. It reacts with water, turns into ammonium. Positive charge, it'll stick around the soil. Over some time, it converts to nitrate, which you see right here, becomes a negative charge. So now we have two like molecules in the soil, or two like charges. So you got a negative charged nitrate, and then you have the negative soil. That nitrate is not gonna it's not gonna stick around forever in the soil. It's gonna get washed out. And this is why, if you've heard stories or news stories, or uh, maybe just heard in passing about having issues with our waterways and algae, just problems in general with fertilizer runoff. This is why right here. And it comes down to basic chemistry, which is fascinating. After I learned all this, is this is what's going on behind it. So with nitrate, uh, nitrogen fertilizer, because of the chemical makeup of that, it's possible for it to wash off farms, uh, even your grass. If you're putting nitrogen fertilizer on your grass, it can wash off. And this is why right here. So I'm gonna go back to the comments to see if we got any. We probably got some comments here. So let me turn this off. I'll go back to here. See see if there's any comments on there. Yeah. High school chemistry throws paper airplane. Yeah, yeah. Shawnee says she's focusing on micronutrients this year. That's good. That's good. Even with micronutrients, when you start talking about like boron, it even though it's considered a micronutrient, it's no less important than all those other nutrients. The plant still needs it to grow and thrive. So that's the important thing to know. It just needs it in a much smaller quantity than some of the other elements. See, Look to Nature Homestead says I've got a bit of chlorophyll going on my bottom leaves on my peppers, but these darn nights won't stay out of the 40s. Chlor Chlorosis. Okay, yeah. Um, yeah, so I mentioned this last week. I think this year, every year I try to get my planting calendar dialed in more efficiently for me. And I mentioned this months ago before we even got into this time of the year that certain plants have certain thresholds for minimum temperatures. So peppers in the 40s, is the plant gonna die? No, absolutely not. The plant's gonna be fine, but the plant's not in its optimum growing environment. So a minimum growing temperature for a pepper plant is 50. So a lot of those seed packets, when you see the writing on there says direct sow these or transplant outside after overnight temperatures are above 50 degrees. That's why right there. Otherwise, the plant's just kind of idling. It can't grow because the way it mechanically works, it needs that temperature to be above its minimum threshold temperature. So I don't remember the last June starting with 50-degree nights. It's been unbelievably hard to plan for temps this year. Yep. Yes, absolutely. Okay, that's good. The helicopter noise wasn't too bad. Okay, good. All right, so to kind of piggyback on the fertilizer information or the chemical makeup of those. There's different types of fertilizer out there. So first one, I think I've shared this before. I have a couple processes for how I add fertilizer or nutrients to my plants. Now this kind of piggybacks off of hydroponic growing. So if you do any hydroponic growing or you know anybody that does that, then they may very well likely have used something like this or something like this. These have two different purposes. This is what I use to start my seedlings off, and I don't give my seedlings this right away. It's only after the true leaves come on, and I can see that the seedling leaves are starting to be recycled. And that's something else too. If you do start from seeds, you've probably seen that at some point the first leaves coming up out of that seed, at some point they'll start to turn yellow and then they'll kind of just drop off the plant, or you'll see them shrivel up. And that again is the plant is recycling the nitrogen out of those seedling leaves or the cotyledon leaves. Once that starts happening, that's when I start adding this. And this I've been using this for years. On the back of this, it has instructions on how to apply it, which are, as long as you follow the instructions, you'll be fine. But I wanted to tell you more about right here. So if you're learning about or wondering what type of fertilizer to use with your plants or your seedlings, right here there's two elements here. So you have the ammonium nitrate, that's the top one. So just to refresh, that's going to have a positive charge. And then you got the nitrate nitrogen that's got the negative charge. So we got two types of nitrogen fertilizer in here. And then below this, it has phosphorus and potassium. So phosphate's got the chemical molecule right there. What's in that? P2, P2O5. So two phosphorus atoms and then five oxygen. That's that. And then you got the potassium below that. If you're ever wondering about those, what those means, that's the form that plant needs to have to take up. So if we dumped raw phosphorus on this plant, it's gonna say cool story. So this one right here, that first one, that's gonna be higher on the nitrogen. So those numbers at the bottom, 644, that 6 represents the nitrogen. I think next week I might go into more depth on how I calculate uh, my fertilizer requirements for my plants. This one right here, 284, that's the phosphorus, that larger number in the middle. So this one I've been using on that strawberry plant that I take out to my demo sessions, because the plants, when they start going to flowering, fruiting, they're going to be using a lot more potassium. Potassium's a building block for life too. That's more biology. I might talk about that later at some point too, because that's a fascinating subject. Um, but those are liquid forms, so hydroponic or liquid fertilizer. I also use slow release fertilizer. I've talked about this many times on these live streams and videos. But I love slow release fertilizer for me and what I do because I front load the grow bags. So whatever plant I have a recipe for each plant. So strawberry plant's going to get a different mix of fertilizer versus a tomato. It's going to be different than the squash. It's going to be different than the watermelon. It's going to be different than herbs. And it's taken me many years to dial in on who is the happiest with what mixture of fertilizer. But the first one's liquid. These are slow release fertilizer. This is what I use, but I don't use them in these. You will see these at your big box stores or the retail retail garden stores. This is more for a DIY or consumer. But the same thing on these too. If you look at the back on the side of the label, you're going to see the type of nitrogen fertilizer. So again, ammonium nitrate, that's that positive charge, and then you got the nitrate nitrogen down below that, that's that negative charge. And then this one right here is what we call a complete fertilizer. It's 14, 14, 14, which means the nitrogen, phosphorus, and the potassium are all the same weights inside that slow release fertilizer. This one right here, I use, and like I said, I don't buy these. I'm just using these for show and tell. I buy these slow release fertilizer, the same stuff in 50-pound bags from my horticulture supplier. So I just have a bigger operation, so it makes no sense to buy these anymore. But these are easier for me to show and tell on here. This is Osmocote Plus. I like this because this has the micronutrients in it. So as time goes on, we talk more about this. You'll see that on the label here, we have, besides at the top, again, the ammonium nitrate and the nitrate nitrogen, we have some other ones too, like sulfur, magnesium, copper, boron, moly, manganese, iron, all the good stuff. So I do use this too for my grow bags. For a couple of reasons. One, those are micronutrients, so the plant doesn't need a ton of them. I use compost as one of my ingredients for my soil mix, and then I have peat moss, of course. Sometimes I'll throw in pine bark fines. That depends on if I need to get the pH of that potting mix down a little bit further. I'm only saying that because with the Osmocote Plus, for my purposes, that's how I guarantee that I have my micronutrients in the grow bags. I do have my compost tested, or typically what happens is when I buy a batch of compost, I'll ask for the test on that compost from my supplier, who then brings a dump truck and unloads it here. So sometimes they have most recent tests from the compost, and then I'm able to look up that to see uh, the composition of the compost. And sometimes with the smaller plants, I'm going to be adding more of this because I don't have time to be babysitting all these plants and saying like, oh, I'm short on boron this month for the strawberry plant or whatever. So with something like this for container gardening, I can add this and then I don't have to worry about it. So regardless of if my compost has enough of these micronutrients as part of that um, ingredient in the soil mix, just by adding this, I can guarantee that that plant's gonna have what it needs when it needs it. The other big element that I'm using or input to those grow bags is peat moss, and peat moss by its very nature, it's not going to have a lot of nutrition to it. So really, in a container, if you're growing a container too, if you buy any store-bought labeled as potting mix for containers, there's not going to be a lot of nutrition in there, and I recommend that you think about how you want that plant set up. If you have a vegetative plant or an herb, not so such a big deal, but if you want to do container tomatoes, this is a good addition to that, um, just to verify and guarantee that you have your micronutrients added into that potting mix, because the containers are not going to have topsoil in it that are naturally going to have all those mineral elements in that. It's going to be some variation of peat moss, vermiculite, perlite, and maybe a couple other things that are going to have no nutrition in them. So you don't want to find out after the fact when your plant starts to put on fruit, and then now you got a major problem because the plant's been short on boron for weeks and weeks. And once that plant goes into its flowering and fruiting stage, it's too late. So that's something good to think about that. Uh, I I was gonna show you all the plants I have over here, but since my phone's not working this week, and that's fine, I still want to show you some of these plants. So I'm gonna check the comments real quick, and then I'll show you what I have behind me. And I have about 80 7-gallon grow bags behind me right now, up on the patio underneath this oak tree, because that was my shade for this week when we got crazy high temperatures. So, oh, Wickershire's here. Nice to see you. Sugar snap peas feeling the heat and weakening. Yeah. Bush beans are flowering. Ooh. So that's interesting. Yeah. I just started my bush beans. I try to here in Minnesota. I try to keep the seasonality going. so I don't grow everything at once. I try to grow for my customers in defined seasons. And I said I just started I have four varieties of bush beans that I just started yesterday. I started those inside just like I do the sugar snap peas, and then I'll transplant those into the bags here probably in about a week once they germinate. All plant starts are drowning out in 3 weeks of rain. That's brutal. Okay, Wickershire says we have access to 10-10-10, so that's that balanced fertilizer. Uh, Prefers a 3-1-2 ratio if I had the money. Okay. See, Look to Nature Homestead says I mostly use my own fertilizers, homemade fish amino acids, and the Bloom Boost mix, bat guano, seabird guano, and worm castings. It makes the plants pray. Okay. I don't have experience with that. Um, I'm always looking for uh, better ways of doing things. And at some point, I don't, for me, for what I do with the small commercial nursery, I've, I've debated, I've gone back and forth on using organic fertilizers. And there's, there's some issues with that for what I do. Like I said, I don't have, time is not a commodity that I have. So I try to take as much time out of a process as possible. Organic fertilizer is fantastic, so don't get me wrong. If you use organic fertilizer or like some type of manure, I saw worm casting. That's all great stuff. It'll get you what you need. There's going to be some variations though, and also typically with those, you can't get as concentrated as a form as you can with the non-organic fertilizers, like what I use. And most slow release fertilizers that I've seen on the market is not going to be organic. Um, Everything else that I do with the plants that I produce here or grow out, I use organic practices except for the fertilizer. And like I said, I've had this internal debate in my head for years and years and years, and hopefully I would love to see somebody invent a slow release fertilizer that is based off of organic. I haven't seen anything on the market. If you guys know of anything, let me know. But I just haven't seen anything that I can effectively use the same way that I use the fertilizer I currently have. Okay, so I think what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna kind of turn this so you can see these plants behind me. And you kind of see what's going on. I'll show you a few of these plants here. So like I said, I have about 70, 80 7-gallon grow bags over here. I'm just gonna pull the row covers off, and I'll probably bring a couple plants over so you can see what they're looking at this stage. But this beautiful oak tree behind me is many more years older than me, and it's been around here for so long. It's a great shade spot. So when we get these freakish temperature swings, this is one of my first spots. So after these seedlings come out of the nursery in the shop under the lights, so most of these were under grow lights a week ago. I brought them out here within the last few days after I potted them up, and then they've sat over here. So that's what that looks like. Okay, so this one right here, this is a 10-gallon grow bag. I think I could do this fine here. It's the first time I've done the laptop camera. But this is a 10-gallon grow bag, so it's significantly bigger than other plants I've shown you here lately. This is a VF Roma tomato, and That's kind of crazy. Even in this shady spot, it typically gets sunlight in the morning for about 2 hours, and then the oak tree shades it for the rest of the day. But this is a VF Roma tomato that's been out here for less than a week, and it's got significantly bigger, not quite double its size from the nursery under lights, but the high temperatures and then that sunlight in the morning has helped it to really pop. So VF Roma tomato here, 10-gallon grow bag. These VF Roma tomatoes, they'll get to be about 3 feet tall or so. And then this is the tomato plant that I started with years and years and years, over a decade ago for a salsa garden. So that's how I got into all of this. If you had a similar experience, drop in the comments because what started all this was I wanted a salsa garden. I was looking for a good salsa tomato, but that's this guy right here, VF tomato, VF Roma. Okay, here's another 10-gallon grow bag. This is honey nut squash. So I do a honey nut and then a baby butternut. They're both through Renee's garden. I have a new trial that I'm running this year too for baby butternut through Johnny Selected Seeds. I don't have that one out here. It's on the other side. I can't remember the variety of it, but it's basically the same thing, a dwarf or smaller butternut squash. So a 10-gallon grow bag, and then you can see what this guy looks like right here. It's at the little baby seedling stage, and this thing's gonna get pretty big. So these ones I definitely trellis. I go vertical with them, or some of my customers, if they have a fence, will just train it to go over to the fence, and then they can latch on with their tendrils and then just do their thing. So that's a squash plant. And then we have one more for you, the 10-gallon grow bags. This is Astia zucchini. So there's my zucchini plant. I've mentioned this a couple times. These plants are fantastic. I grow these every year. It's just a great performing plant. Does great in this climate, and I tell my customers you have to keep an eye on this plant because once it starts to fruit, the if you, I swear it grows as you look at it, but the zucchini fruits on these they'll be like the size of a baseball bat if you take your eyes off them for a couple days. They once that flower pollinates and you start to see the growth on that fruit, it'll take off like very quickly. Okay, and then I got a couple other I can share with you. Let's do oh, this is a good one to share. These are 5-gallon grow bags. So this is from High Mowing Seeds. It's called a HMS red picnic pepper. I've been growing these for years too, but that's this guy right here. Picnic peppers I love. They have multiple colors that they do. I think, as I understand it, High Mowing Seeds actually bred these plants. But this picnic pepper plant here in a 5-gallon grow bag, they'll get to about 2.5, 3 feet tall. I usually stake it with a 2.5 foot bamboo stake and then tie the main stem to that. And then that's all the support it needs. Each one of those plants will put out typically about 40 peppers. And I have seen this where if we have a long, warm fall, I can usually get a couple of rounds of peppers from that. So first round, not uncommon to have 40 picnic peppers per plant. And then as we get later in the summer, it'll go through another round of flowering and fruiting. So that's a red picnic pepper. And then, oh, I wish I had my phone out. There's a wasp over here, so we're just gonna kind of put this back. Yeah, I'm not even making it up. There's a wasp over there. That's the that's probably the biggest struggle of being out in the country is there's lots of creatures out here, both friendly and not so friendly. But anyway, I also have cucumbers out here. I have English cucumbers. I have bush slicers. I just transplanted those here in the last 2 days, so they're not much to look at. But also lemon cucumbers, and there's one other one too. I'm drawing a blank on. Oh, pickling, pickling cucumbers too. So a bunch of those out there. Jay says 40 peppers per plant. We do not get that here. What type? Just curious, what type of pepper plants do you typically grow, Jay? Just curious. Let's see, Wickershire Project says Black Beauty zucchini that gets stupid big if unwatched. Yeah, exactly. So it's very cool to watch them. And it is crazy how fast those can grow if you're not paying attention to them, or if you go out of town for the weekend, you come back and they're like crazy, like a club size. 8 to 10 inches on the Black Beauty zucchinis. Okay, sure. Yeah, the wasps are probably looking for some caterpillars or prey right now, I'm sure, and they'll just do their thing. So anyway, thanks for spending your time with me today, and we got to talk a little bit about nitrogen, the different forms of that the plant could take, how it interacts with the soil, especially here in the Midwest with having a negative charge. We have a break, so if you're in my climate and you're looking for transplanting or windows, this is a perfect window to transplant stuff from inside to outside as we have the overcast skies. We have a little break before the next heat wave, and this is the big push for all the summer plants coming out. So in a month from now, as we're approaching the end of June into July, we're gonna the garden's gonna be looking really good, and then we'll see what happens for the rest of the year. But